What are we going to talk about today? So, sentence casing. This is a bit of an interesting case, pun intended, I suppose, because this is something that we find in a lot of our web apps, no matter what kind of tech we use, whether it's within the Power Platform space or not, because ultimately it's all about data hygiene. And it's been something on my radar recently, and I wanted to find different ways essentially to solve for this in different parts of the Power Platform and bring this to you today. And of course, keeping it as low code as possible with a few more hacks that are a little bit more pro dev. So let's move along. A little bit about me. For those that don't know me, my name is Angeliki. I live in the UK and work for Avanade within the business application space, and particularly between CRM and general Power Platform. As part of my accent, as you can tell, there's a few things going on. I'm Greek Italian, but I came to the UK about a decade ago. I'm also an MVP in business applications here in the UK. And I also got a bit of a hybrid nature. So I used to be a change manager and hence I'm ProSci certified. But ultimately, I'm a full-blown CRM geek. I've always been in CRM since I started my career. Love it. It's my passion and true fulfilling role to be able to be in functional architecture. And I'm also a community lead. So within Avanade, I lead the global Copilot community of practice, which is a fantastic opportunity. But also within the UK, I also lead one of the user groups with a few other fantastic MVPs, which is Experts Live UK. Either way, you've heard me mention the community multiple times already. That's because I absolutely love it. The passion, the energy, the people is remarkable. And I love being its own human evangelist, which is all about being a tech evangelist that really advocates about the human impact that we have. I speak at a lot of conferences or events, and I love blogging. It's all movie and geek themed. It's called empoweredhumans.net. So I'd love to connect with all of you ultimately. Otherwise, let's kick this off. Okay, so this is the classic slide. We're gonna have to start with why, and it's always a nod to one of my favorite thought leaders, Simon Sinek. So why is sentence casing such a special matter? Why should we care? Well, to begin with, it's all about the human touch. We know that every time we have a text field, a free text field, it's prone to human error. And when it comes to sentence casing, so having the right format for a name, let's say first name, a surname, whatever that may be, maybe it's a city, all of these things, how are we expecting just the human to drive this complete accuracy? We can't assume that we've all transcended our standard human nature. At the same time, the other reason is that we should have expectations from the systems that we create as well as consume. So if our systems are not doing the hard work, they don't have the right validation logic, they don't have the right processes in place, then why should we as end users expect any more? But also, let's kind of flip it on the sides. Why is it important to get it right? So first of all, it's data hygiene. Now, I know I'm biased because I love CRM too much, but putting that aside, every time we build an application, its data is its lifeblood, and it's the lifeblood of the organization behind it, which means that if we don't champion data hygiene, if you don't champion for that golden source of truth and you're not protecting it actively, sentence casing is just one of the many reasons, if you're not actively acting for it, that you're going to have issues. And with that in mind, those issues are not just general kind of like, oh, this looks unprofessional and typos looking and whatnot. In fact, it can have other kinds of impact. For example, impact on downstream systems. I'll give you a very simple example. So think of your CRM. Let's say your model-driven app is connected to a downstream system completely aside Power Platform. That is an end user legacy system that is processing those first names, but it needs sentence casing, and otherwise it fails. So imagine you've put all the work into your API, connecting your systems, and suddenly you can't even pass your data because you failed at such a simple point. And then obviously there's all sorts of other kinds of impact in your processes, right? So obviously there's bigger things at play that we need to consider. Cool. So let's think about this use case and the requirements. And I want us to think about it both from the back end and the front end. So in this particular case, we're going to think of our para. In this specific case, it's the usual Event 365 model-driven app. So this is for our backend users, in particular the Avengers. We've heard about this, we love this. And our front-end users are also important because they have their Power Pages portal. And they are going to be the shield agents, that they are also raising their own kind of records when it comes to new battles. Ultimately, those two users interact, they're in the same database. We want to make sure the data between them flows appropriately, and sentence casing, depending on the product and the tech we're working, is sorted. So to summarize, our model-driven app users need to be guided on sentence casing. So we're going to take care of our UX, and we're going to take care of the validation logic that drives this for two particular fields, which is first name and last name. Now, obviously, we're going to guide the users from your UX perspective, but if they don't do this, then the system should apply it, so we enforce it. Ultimately, we want Dataverse to be the golden source of truth. We want to hold sentence case data when it comes to first and last names. We did say we're going to flip it on its side. So let's think about our front-end users, aka our shield agents. So in our Power Pages portal, we're also going to guide our users. And if they don't apply the sentence casing, we're going to direct them with clear error messaging. So in specific, we're not even going to allow them to submit a form that holds that record. And we're going to tell them why they cannot submit. So UX is very, very important throughout. So we are very clear on the point of failure, because there's been so many instances where I'm sure all of us have seen those journeys where there's an error and it's super impossible to understand what's failing, and we're so frustrated that we probably end up abandoning or losing faith in the system. So it's very important to handle your messaging before you get the error as well as after. Cool. So let's put our requirements aside and think about the recipe here. We are going to, let's think of pure Dataverse terms and setting this up for a model-driven app. We're going to add a tooltip, aka a description for our first and last name. This is our first point of call to add some guidance. And should the user ignore the sentence casing, then we're going to have a Power Automate flow, and it's going to enforce it as soon as we save. And this is again because we want Dataverse to be our golden source of truth. In reverse, what we're going to do for Power Pages portal and our shield agents is that the basic form they are submitting, we're going to manage metadata. Is specifically, we're going to add an update to have validation logic with a regular expression. So we're going to have regex, and we're going to have error messaging. So when it fails and they're unable to submit in a form, they're not just looking around trying to figure out why that failed. We're going to be very specific, saying, you need to do this, and what this is, what field and what not. But of course, we don't want them to get to that error, so we're going to add a description right above the field where they're inputting their data to guide them straight away. So remember, UX first, make sure you're adding that seamless experience all the way. Cool. So, and this is the usual pun, I just have to add it, that it's all about let's build simple, configurable, and extendable solutions together, and how I managed the selfie earlier this year with the Avengers training headquarters filming location. I'm sorry, I just have to. It's just too good, and I'm too much of a geek. Anyway, let's move this forward. I think it's much more fun if we go into a demo. Okay, so quick run through the Avengers 365 app. This is a custom model-driven app, and we use this as Avengers to be able to primarily prepare and go through battles and prepare for the Avengers that are going to take part against the villains that are threatening us, the protected cities that are marked against them. Of course, there's AI involved, so we have Jarvis, which is our very own assistant. We are monitoring Hydra, monoliths, and humans, all sorts of cool things. And there's a lot of the Marvel Cinematic Universe put into that. So what are we going to do particularly here is look at our Avengers records, which is our version of a contact table, okay? And we're going to see this automation come to life. But first of all, let's see where the problem will be to begin with. So we're talking about the first name and the last name. So let's see the Power Automate flow in the background before we go and see this beauty come to life. So we have this flow. Let me go into the editing screen. This should have loaded already, but here we are. Okay, so it's going to be simple, and we're going to look at 2 steps. And particularly, we're going to use our magical JSON powers to bring this to life. So we got 2 steps, keeping it simple as promised. The first step is our usual Dataverse trigger for when a record is added or modified, because we want to make sure that this is all both for new records for an Avenger, but also for modified records. Now, the table is obviously the Avengers table, which is our version of a contact table. Scope, about organization, because this is a demo, so keeping it simple. But of course, please always think of your own security model and making sure that you're on the right track there. The next step is to look at the columns that this should be triggered by in terms of the format. So this is the first name and the last name logical names. So we have them there. And the very important ingredient, which is going to give away how we're bringing this to life, is the JSON trigger condition that is then going to turn into our expression. So there's many ways, by the way, to do this. Yeah, you could in theory filter rows. I love working with trigger conditions. I think they're very neat, and it's a great way to experiment further. So I appreciate that you can't see the whole thing here. There's a fair bit of things going on. So instead, I've put it into a nice Word document, and hopefully that's zoomed in enough for everyone. So what do we have here? Let's break it down step by step. So this is a trigger condition that is looking at 2 different things that could be happening at an OR kind of format. So we are saying, check that this is not happening. This is where the not comes into the equation. Both the first bundle and the second bundle are the same, albeit looking at the first name and last name columns separately. So obviously, if we cover the first one, we get the logic, right? So let's make sure this is that whatever the next bit is not the case. So the first bit that we're doing is retrieving the value of the first name. That's what this first bit is doing. Then what we're going to do is compare that value, that string, to a concatenated version of what a sentence-cased first name value of that kind should look like. So this is where the concat part comes to life. And then we are using the 2 upper part and the 2 lower part, which, as you probably guessed, is uppercasing the first letter. That's why we're seeing this part here. And similarly, the function will then go and say, okay, you looked at the first letter, you've uppercased it, happy days. Let's take the rest of the letters and lowercase them. So what we are doing here is saying, check that the value that the first name has that we have retrieved is not sentence case, because we don't want to trigger the flow unnecessarily, right? But there's a chance that the last name is also messed up. So what we're saying is either or could happen, could be both, could be one. But either at least one needs to be the case for this flow to trigger. So once we do that, we will get an update row step to tell us, and of course, let's always put some lovely names to name our steps to know and to let the rest of our makers and admins happy. So what we'll say is that, okay, our table name is Avengers, great. So we'll take the contact records and then we'll apply the expression, which is exactly what you saw earlier from the concat part onwards. This is our sentence casing magic. So we have our expression written down here, and the only thing we're doing is alternating the logical name between first and last name. So once this has been set up, let's see it come to life. So let's make a mistake here. Let's write Bruce Banner, poor Hulk. We're going to add a few problems in his first and last name. And let's save the record. Now, let's refresh, and sometimes it doesn't trigger straight away. That's fine. Let's save and close, and we'll see it there as well. It takes a moment sometimes. You know, you have to pray really hard to those demo gods. So there we go. It's sentence case. Sometimes it takes a few seconds. Of course, my tenant is in the US and everyone is using it this time. So there we go. We have sentence case. Of course, this could be triggered if just the first name of the last name was also messed up. Now, this looks great, but what about our Power Pages? What if our portal and Shield agents are also struggling? So this is where we have a basic form that we're asking the Shield agents to submit for new battles. And we want to make sure that we're handling our UX. So as promised, we're going to add a description here just above the battle title to tell them that you please have to do that in a sentence-cased format. The way to sort that out is if you go to Power Pages Management and you open up your basic form and you go to basic form metadata, the way to add the description is if you set it up, type equal attribute, then of course choose the logical name. If you scroll down, there is a description area. There we go, description instructions. So add description, yes, it will by default now. Position, you can choose a few things. I prefer it above the field. Now, use attributes description property. That's what you have in Dataverse. I didn't want to use that because I want to give a different experience to our portal users. So I said no and added my own. So this is what we are seeing, as you can see back here. Now this is cool, but ultimately we want the validation error, and this is where we're going to use regex. So this is a very simple formula here that says take the first letter, uppercase it, make sure that it's uppercased, and then as in don't accept it until it's uppercase, and then the rest one needs to be lowercase. However, we don't want the system to have an error without the users understanding what the issue is, and this is where we add our error message. It's very specific, so we're telling them what they need to do, which is use sentence casing, what the field is, and the fact that they won't be able to submit the form without. So let's say that in practice. Let's say the name of the battle is called Orbis, but obviously I haven't sentence case. That's pretty terrible. So I can't submit. I have a very clear understanding of what I've done wrong. So now that I'm going to allow myself to do this right, I'll submit and it will go through. Beautiful. So ultimately, you have different ways to do this. Depending on where you are, MDA versus Power Pages, you have different approaches as well. But ultimately, please look after your UX. Make sure that your users don't have to get to that area. You're guiding them with the right messaging. Let the system do the hard work so your data is clean and sorted. So we have 3 links here. We got a link to my Linktree account, which is all my socials. I'd love to connect with all of you. It's so great to be with the community and having all those conversations. I have a blog post of how to set up the Power Automate flow, and I have a blog post for the regular expression that you can do with Power Pages and all the ways to set up logic for your metadata. So they should be in the chat. I can add them otherwise. Please do share your thoughts as well. Would love to hear from you. Otherwise, thank you so much. Back to you, David.